I was born in actually Trenton, Ontario. With my dad was in the military. Spent 25 years in the military, so I was a base brat, running around in my diapers on a military base most of my life. When my dad retired in '79, we moved back to St. Stephen, New Brunswick, and Dad built a house on the Hull Road. I went to school in grades 11 and 12, which I graduated from St. Stephen High School in 1981, one of the first ones to graduate from the new high school, which was very nice and it was kind of neat. But I joined the military as my dad was in the military. It just it seemed like kind of the right thing to do, follow my father's footsteps. As a matter of fact, I even followed in the same trade at one time and went to aero engine tech. My dad was an airframe, aero engine, and what they call an IE tech, avionics technician. So I decided I wanted to join as an aero engine tech, and I tried and tried and tried for the first couple of years. I couldn't get in. They were so overwhelmed with applications. So after my third year, after working in St. Stephen, playing hockey in St. Stephen, playing baseball for the St. Stephen Sabres, and playing for the junior A hockey team at St. Stephen Rotary Wheels, I finally got my goal was to join the military, and I was called in '84. So I joined the military in '84. I left St. Stephen in June, and I went to boot camp in Cornwallis. Cornwallis was a bit of an eye opener. It was very interesting. As to say, they take your pride away, they take your dignity away, they take everything away, and they give it back to you a little bit at a time over a 10-week period. Well, it was definitely a good 10 weeks, and I did lots of push ups, lots of sit ups, and lots of running. And but I managed to get through the 10 weeks. Graduated in Cornwallis, went to my trades training in Borden, Ontario, where I did aero engine technician, worked on the tutors for approximately 6 months, then was posted to Greenwood. Well, when I got posted to Greenwood, I worked on the flight line, but I was a what they call a under a youth educational training program when I first joined, which meant I was in strictly for a year. I did everything that the Reg Force did, but after the year was up, they could keep me or they could release me. And being the first one going through from the Maritimes, I ended up being released, which was a good thing. So I left. 3 months later, I got a phone call. They offered me three other different trades, which was military police, Med-A, which was medical technician, and I think it was photo tech was the other one. And anyways, I looked at the MP one and I looked at the Med-A one, and Med-A was the kind of thing to do. I worked for Kenny Holmes' ambulance service at the time, and I ended up loving medicine, so I chose to go into medicine. I left to go to Borden in it was September, October that year, and did my trades training until December, and then I was posted to Coal Lake, Alberta. I did three and a half months, almost 4 months out in Coal Lake, Alberta, where I turned around and learned my job basically. And I played hockey a couple times out there, and the CO decided that he was going to keep me out there. Well, it was minus 60 below. I got off the plane in t-shirt and shorts, and I was cold. Didn't like the place. Didn't want to be there, but ended up staying there for 5 years. I loved it. And after I left Cold Lake, Alberta, I was posted to Petawawa, Ontario. Did 3 years in Petawawa. Then I was posted to Halifax. Did 14 years in Halifax. Posted back to Petawawa. Did a little bit more time in Petawawa, 3 more years in Petawawa, and then posted to Ottawa. And I finished up my career after doing 28 years. Um, I just had enough and said that was it and left.
Okay, so the 9/11 happened.
Right, 2001.
Tell me about that.
So In 2001, actually, I was flying the day that 9/11 happened. We were on our way to Vancouver. I was doing my trauma residency out in Vancouver Hospital, which is the big trauma center for BC. And we were in a flight, and we were in a flight holding pattern for about an hour just outside of Vancouver. And next thing you know, we were told that there was going to be two F-18s escorting us into the airport. Two F-18s showed up on our wingtips, and we weren't told anything else. We were just told that these are going to escort us into the airport, and that would have been it. So we landed in the airport. We couldn't get off the plane. We weren't allowed to go anywhere. We were sitting out in the tarmac, and then they finally come out and told us that the Trade Center had been hit with two aircraft. And by this time, everything was on the ground. It was shortly after, probably about an hour after the incident happened. There wasn't any planes landing. There was probably about 30 planes on the tarmac, and they were processing one plane by one to get us off the plane, get our luggage out of there and stuff. It was a big eye opener because the fact that, America had been hit. It was a little more scarier when you're sitting on a plane and two F-18s all of a sudden approach you. I mean, there's things that go through your head when you're sitting on a plane and you're just being told you're being escorted in. All our phones were cut. We weren't allowed to access the newsreels on the plane. The video link was shut down. We were just sitting in the blind for almost probably about 2 hours by the time they were finished, all said and done. And we got into the airport. That's when we basically found out. But scary moments after, and I think for the next few days, working in the trauma center, it was a different feeling. It was when people were being brought in and they were traumatized. They were, through whether it would be car accidents or whatever. Everybody was screened differently. Everybody was looked at different, and Vancouver is a very multicultural city, and people were being shuffled off to the side. Other people were being, sent through, and other people were being screened and weren't allowed to come through. I mean, screening got tight in the emergency department. We had to have passes wherever we went. If we didn't have our pass, we weren't getting in. If you didn't have a code, you weren't getting in behind the closed doors, and that was staff members. So patients were lining up outside. It was just different, and even from our going from the hospital to our hotels, the sense of feeling from people. They were seeing us in our uniform, and people were at us, and it was a scary feeling for quite a long time. I mean, are they attacking the military? Are they attacking the people? It it just, I don't know. It's hard to explain the feelings that you go through. Um, when the government stepped up and said that the military was going to be stepping up, uh, it almost made your stomach turn, um, because obviously anytime the Americans get involved, the Canadians are not too far to follow. If not, they're in the lead, and the Americans are not too far to follow. So in this case, the Americans were in the lead, and the Canadians followed, and we ended up going places that no one has ever heard of, or no one has ever seen except for on the news. And yeah, it becomes scary, because eventually they're going to pick your number. You're going to be going. And, people signed up for the Second World War. We weren't really told we were going to sign up. When I signed on the dotted line in 1984, I signed thinking that, oh, I'm going to be doing peacekeeping, or I'm going to be doing, you know, uh, going from base to base and looking after aircraft and looking, and then when I get into the medical trade, I was going to be looking after people. Didn't realize I was going to be going to war zones, or didn't realize I was going to be going overseas, getting shot at, bombed, scudded, from different countries. And I don't know. It's something you just don't sign up for. And I know we have brave people from World War One and World War Two that were willing and ready to go, wanted to sign up, wanted to defend our country. Well, when I signed up, that's what our goal was. That's what we thought we were signing up for, was defending the borders of Canada. Not realizing that those borders extended far from beyond Canada into other countries. And even to this day, when people are signing on the dotted line, that's what they're signing for. They're signing not just to protect Canada, but to protect the world, to protect the people in the world from horrible people, from people that like to push buttons, that want to push buttons and start something.
So, so when you, excuse me, so when you got the word that you were being mobilized, what ran through your mind?
There was a lot that went through my mind when we found out that we were being immobilized. First of all, who's going? How many's going? What's our job? What's our job description? What's our rules of engagement? I mean, every deployment that I've gone on, we've always done training. We've done workups. We train 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And when people think this is a glorious job, yeah, it is, but it's also got its drawbacks. It's hard on family life. What was my first thought? My first thought was, I'm going somewhere to make sure that my family's going to be safe. That I do know. I'm going to prevent the wars from coming back into Canada, into the borders of Canada. I'm going to make sure that my soldiers all come back safe. As a leader, that is the most important thing, is to make sure that my soldiers, the soldiers that work for me or that work under me, with me, all come back to see their families. And that drew from the day that we started training for the op, that day that we were interviewed. We went through different interviews to make sure that we were all good to go, as you might say. We have the little tick in the box saying that he's mentally stable, that he's got this checked off, this checked off. Well, my biggest box to be checked off was to make sure that I was able to deal with sending my troops out and possibly not having them come home. And in the instance going to Afghanistan, I lost 2 troops on my tour. In future tours after that, I lost a couple of troops as well. And at the end of the day, when you're doing your ramp ceremony, you're tearful for the people that are sitting at home waiting for their family members to come home, and they're not. That one, that if they are coming home, that they're in a box. That's if they are able to. And I think the hardest thing that I've ever done is to put one of my soldiers in a box and send him home.
So, how many tours did you do during your? How many rotations did you do into Afghanistan?
So I did what they call a tour and a bit. The Olympics were going on when I was heading over, so they had to utilize the aircraft for the Olympic teams. So instead of having us rotate out at 6-month period, I ended up doing almost 9 months by the time I rotated in and out. Normally your rotation's 6 months. I only did one stint in there. That was, for me, that was enough. I really didn't want to go back. And I know for many others that it was their second, third tour under the belt. And I don't know how they handled it, but the one tour that I handled, it was a very tough tour. I come home and I wasn't right. I knew I wasn't right. I wouldn't step on dirt. Anything that was soft, I would not step on. If it was hard pavement, I was good. I couldn't even step onto carpet, soft carpet in my own home. And it took probably about 6 months after I come home where I actually finally broke down. I couldn't put my uniform on. I couldn't see the world. I couldn't go outside. I couldn't shop. My social existence just stopped. I stopped existing. I stopped living life. I felt empty inside. I felt like I'm just a shell, and I'm carrying on with life. I'm going through the motions, and I didn't want to do that anymore. I got to the point where I was ready to just finish it all and walk away.
When you think back, you don't have to think back because I know you carry them all with you. Are there moments during your tour that you think of every day?
Yeah.
And you don't have to talk about them, Doug. I mean, but there's.
I gotta get a drink here. Just give me a second. You hit a nerve. One day in particular that stands out on my tour, November 17th, 2007. It was around midnight, and I can't remember if it was the 16th or the 17th now because it's been a while, but we got called about, I guess it was about 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, and I knew that the Canadians were going to be moving. I knew the schedules of the Canadians, being the one in the head of the triage and moving casualties from the airport to the hospital. So I knew roughly what was going to take place on each and every day. I knew what the movements of people were outside the wire. Got a call. There was casualties, and what they did was they prioritized them. There was alphas or bravos, and usually if alpha or a bravo was coming in, they were coming in by chopper. If it was a Charlie, they were walking. Delta, it meant that they had expired or they were going to expire en route. And we had numbers were sent in. I can't remember the numbers, but I know there was there was two Deltas, possibly three. So I went in that night like I normally do, grabbed my gear and went in, and the choppers were on final, so I got my crew out, got out on the flight line, brought the three alphas that were coming in. There was another aircraft coming in with two more bravos, so we went back out and grabbed those. And I always, my thing is I always take the last patient, the last trauma bay. So I always took the last trauma bay and got my casualty all cleared up. He wasn't wounded that bad, but he was bad enough that he had to go to the OR. I was going to scrub into the OR that night and go with my patient, but I couldn't. The RSM, the regimental sergeant major that day, or that evening came to me and said, Doug, we just got news that one of our medics is missing, and they don't know where, but he's missing, and we're sending a chopper out in around 2 or 3 hours to go look for him, and they want you to go. And I said, okay. So they said, well, you can send anybody else. We know you have a casualty. You can send anybody else. And I said, well, no. I said, I'd sooner go and bring my soldier home than have somebody go out there and live through the nightmares of not finding him or not bringing him home. So 3 o'clock in the morning, I met up with the military police and a couple of forensics people, and we flew out to the site where the Med-A went missing. And it was still dark out. One of the vehicles was still burning from the ID attack. And anyways, daylight came. We couldn't get near the vehicle. It was still way too hot. It was about 1,200 degrees. And I got close enough that I could see somebody that was still inside. Obviously, they had expired, and they were no longer with us. It was about 10 o'clock that morning. We finally were able to push the vehicle off the hotspot, and I crawled in the vehicle, and sure enough, it was my med tech. I found his dog tags. I found enough of them that I could identify who it was. And then I basically bagged him, and I guarded him the whole way back till we got him back to Kandahar. And this was probably one of the worst moments, because his girlfriend, soon to be his wife, which they had just proposed to each other prior to the tour starting, and they were going to get married after the tour, was on another medical crew on Kandahar. And we had to tell her that her fiance had passed, that an IED had exploded and killed him instantly. He was pinned in the vehicle, and basically his body burnt beyond recognition. The rest of the time, the ramp ceremony, all our ramp ceremonies happened at around 3 o'clock in the morning. It was the only time that we were able to put 1,200 people on the tarmac, have a ceremony for our fallen soldiers, and send them off with dignity. And so the whole camp, 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was more than 1,200 people there. I would say that there was close to 9,000 out of the 10,000 that were on base. This gentleman was very well known. He was a good medic, and when the medical world gets hit, it goes out like within minutes. The medical world's been hit. Everybody knew him from our branch. Anybody with a medical cap badge knew him, knew what he was like, knew his wife or his fiance, knew his fiance very well. And it hit hard. And I can still see her face. I can still see Nicholas's face. And it haunts me. Mm-hmm. It always, this time of year, probably the worst time. I lost a medic on August 22nd, just after our tour started, and I lost him on November 17th, and those two haunt me. I mean, I've seen lots of death in my career. I've seen lots of life in my career. I've delivered babies, especially in conflict countries like Rwanda. We were delivering babies, I mean, what so much better than taking a life? is giving life and allowing life to live. And that's what our goal is as medical people. It's not to take lives. It's not to, uh, watch people die. It's to do our best to save them. And those two haunt me every day. I see their faces every time I wake up in the morning. Sometimes before I go to sleep at night. I try to do things that take my mind off things, but it's not easy. It's hard, very hard.
So a lot of this stuff, as you know, Doug, it accumulates in soldiers, and the what you was there anything that besides that? Are there anything else? I know it all accumulates, but is there anything else that happened to you? Because you were injured yourself, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that happened during your active duty helping another soldier, am I correct?
Yeah.
Would you want to talk about that?
Um,
Because that was the motivation that basically kind of tipped the scale for you, was it not?
yeah. I don't know. Motivation. There's a lot of things that tip my scale towards being in the medical career. Helping people was definitely was one. There's no better rewarding feeling that knowing that sorry, I just hear that ring. There's no better feeling to know that you're helping somebody. That somebody, whether it be a soldier, whether it be somebody I come across the road, like in a motor vehicle accident, there's no better feeling at the end of the day to know that you've helped somebody live another day, or you've helped somebody being able to go back and see their family. Motivation, yeah, there was definitely times where I was motivated more to seek and do more things and do them better. Whether it was through personal injury and somebody helping me, uh, and there's some parts that I can laugh at being injured at, personal injury, and sometimes I look at it and go, man, I'm so lucky to be here. When I was in Bosnia, somebody shot the engine of my ambulance. A sniper took out my ambulance engine. It rendered us incapable of finishing our job. So we couldn't go to the motor vehicle accident or wherever we were supposed to pick up the casualties. And but yet you didn't feel insecure in your job. You knew that that you were looked after. You were definitely looked after, even though, yes, somebody just took out my engine of my ambulance, and yes, there probably is a new smell in the back of the ambulance now, because I have a medic in the back, and she had no idea what it was. She just heard the loud bang. We've had rounds hit the side of our Bison ambulance when I was in Bosnia. Going down the road, somebody was just shooting, a weapon at us, and you could hear the ceramic tiles exploding, but no rounds come into the vehicle. No rounds. It's an armored, plated vehicle. And I think through that, I was more motivated. I was young in my career. I was more motivated to get higher up so that I could make sure that my soldiers and my medics and the people that worked for me stayed safe. You know, and maybe sometimes they said, well, you don't have to do that as a sergeant major. You know, you don't have to go out there. You don't. But if I expected my troops to do it, I wanted to show them that I could do it. And they always say lead by example, and your troops will follow a good leader anywhere. And when I got injured, I really looked at that, and I really looked at one, self-awareness. I looked at where I was and what my goal. What is my goal? What do I want to say for myself at the end of the day? How do I want to come out this a better person? And I looked at it saying, I need to come out and use this to train others that yes, you too can get hurt. Yes, you too can be a casualty, but you can be strong and come back to your job. You can wave things off, as one person said, you override and move on. That's not easy. It's not easy to just to do an override. It's not easy just to say, I need to forget this and move on. If you forget it, then you're going to make those mistakes again, and you're going to end up in the same place. Our vehicle hit IEDs. Did they cause damage to us? No. I mean, we got rattled around inside the vehicle, but nothing penetrated the vehicle. And that was one thing that they really looked after for medical people. And I was with the Van Doos, and I never forget this, but I was with the Van Doos on from 22 RCR, 22 regiment, Royal Regiment in Valcartier. And they said, Doc, this is what we're going to do. We're going to wrap you up in a blast blanket, and we're going to set you in a spot where you're protected. You're not to move. You're not to do anything until we come and get you. Once we see that it's safe, we'll come and get you. So, anyways, we moved, and I got into the back of the lab, and the sergeant handed me the earplugs. And I said, already got my own, thank you. And he said, you know what they're for, right? And jokingly, I said, yeah, you know, protect my hearing. He says, no, it's so you don't hear the first one coming. And it's like, I kind of looked at him, and he smiled, and he said, just joking. He said, put them in. We'll yell at you. Don't get offended, but we'll yell at you. And if we yell at you in French, he said, it's just because it's our first language. And that's what we come out with. So, and I knew a little bit of French. I was able to handle orders in French. If somebody was yelling at me to do something, I understood. It was for my safety. But normally sergeants don't yell at sergeant majors, and corporals don't yell at, medical people. So, but when we backed over the first IED, it was like a cherry bomb going off in your underwear. That's what it felt like. And not that feels good, but I mean, I hit the top, come back down, hit the bottom, and here I'm wrapped up like a Tootsie Roll in blast blankets. So once we got everything all sorted out, they unwrapped me out of the blast blankets, and we carried on with the mission. But it was just weird that they took their blast blankets off of themselves and gave it to me. And at the end of it, I'd asked one of the sergeants, I said, why did you give me your blast blanket? And he says, Doc, if something happened to you, he said, chances are it's going to happen to me. He said, but if you're all together and I'm not, you can put me back together. I can't put you back together. And from that time on, this was probably in about week 3 of the tour in Afghanistan, I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have to worry about being shot at. I didn't have to worry, even though I was shot at, even though we were rocketed. I mean, I had I believe it was a hand-propelled grenade that landed about 20 feet in front of me, just sat there and spun. Didn't go off, didn't explode. The warhead had fallen off of it, off a mortar round. And I hit the dirt. I heard the whistling coming. I hit the dirt, and it was spinning dirt up around me. There was three of us there at the time. We were actually walking towards the hospital to go in because we had been hit, and we knew there was going to be casualties on the Kandahar base. Yeah, so self-motivation, self-awareness, and fear of not going home is motivation enough to keep you going, because you're on your toes, your head's on a swivel, you're going 120 miles an hour for the whole time you're in Afghanistan, and eventually that wears out on you. It would be nothing for me to go 48 hours, 72 hours, 4 days with an hour's sleep, an hour's rest, and off I go. Back in the days, even when I started training, back in 84, 85, it was still called shell shock or battle fatigue. It's only been since, I believe, Afghanistan, and maybe even, 90, 94, 95, maybe in around that time frame, when they started realizing that there was people coming back from war zones that had battle fatigue or, shell shock. But they soon realized that it was more geared towards PTSD, and it's hard to explain. How do you know if you got PTSD? How do you know if you're dealing with shell shock, battle fatigue, or any psychological or mental disorder that is caused from being in a war zone? When I come back from the Gulf War in 91, yeah, we seen bodies. We saw people getting shot. We saw our surgeons working on the Republican Guards, prisoners of war and stuff like this. But when we come back, it was different. You weren't. It wasn't like you were out there. You were battling the war, battling elements and stuff. But when I come back from Rwanda, I was different. I knew there was something different. Rwanda really made me look at people, and how I was dealing and treating people, coming in through the door. One, when somebody shows up in your emergency department and they're sick, they're there for a reason. And you're just looking at them going, what's wrong? You got a cold or a flu or a virus, what would you like me to do? Your empathy, your sympathy towards that patient is gone. And I think that was my first sign to realize that there was something definitely wrong when I come back from Rwanda. My bosses, I think, realized this, and I ended up in a little office with 4 windows, and it wasn't quite padded room, but it was 4 windows and a door and paperwork. So I wasn't dealing with public, and it took me almost a year to start being able to realize and deal with people from the public. And at that time, PTSD really wasn't well known. It was more of you're just coming back off tour and you're just still dealing with stuff from the tour, and they really didn't have a name for it. And but when I come back from Afghanistan, and that was a whole different ball game. And I look back as a medical professional. I look back and I hear stories from, or I did hear stories from World War II vets, some World War One when I was in, and when they come back, they really didn't have anybody to talk to. They didn't have anybody to tell their stories to because they couldn't just talk to Joe Blow in the public sector and have them understand what they went through in the trenches or what they went through being shot at, what they went through not eating for 3 days or not sleeping. And so they, again, that's one of the reasons why the Legion was formed, where these guys could meet. These guys could sit down, have a beer, talk to the guy next to them, and they could relate, and they could relate, and they could relate. And but now, coming back from Afghanistan, we don't do that. For some reason, people don't sit down and discuss their problems with just the ordinary person. They don't have anybody to talk to. Why? Because it's again, it's a different war. It's a different feeling when you come home. It's different when you take a life. You know, when you point your weapon and at somebody, it's going to save your life or it's not, and that depends on you. And that depends on you being able to pull the trigger. It takes anybody can pull the trigger, but it takes somebody to stand behind that gun, to point it at somebody, and take a life is not easy. It's not something that I wish on anybody. And when you have 16-year-olds or kids pointing AK-47s at you that are fully loaded, got a second clip on it, and these kids know how to use it, you don't hesitate. You don't hesitate, because if you hesitate, you wouldn't be here. I've had rounds go by my head. I've had rounds hit my vehicles. I've had mortar rounds hit my vehicle. I've had rockets skip under my vehicle. And I know that there is somebody out there with their hand on my shoulder protecting me, because if I look back at everything that I've done, I shouldn't be here today. I walked over landmines to save people. Not knowing they were there, I just did my drills. I stepped in the tracks, kept the guy from bleeding out. I got an award for it. Didn't really care about the award. I saved the guy. That's my goal. My goal at the end of the day was to make sure that this gentleman got from here to here and was still alive. And I did that. And did I do it carelessly? Maybe. Did I do it out of just adrenaline rush and going and not thinking? Maybe. It's hard to say what went through my head when I was doing it. But when I was able to sit down and filter it all, that's when it hit me. That's when I'm saying, wow, man, I'm still here. And I'd pinch myself. Or I wake up in the morning, I can breathe. I'm still here. I can pinch myself. And when I was in Afghanistan, here I have battle load full of bullets. I have a defensive weapon, a 9mm, stuck on my leg. I have a C7A2 rifle with 10 clips or 10 magazines loaded with 30 rounds in it. Well, 28 rounds in it. And an extra 4,000 rounds that I can get to. I went out on one mission where I come back with no rounds left. One, I was protecting myself. Two, I was protecting my patient. We had gone to a site where there was casualties. We started processing the casualties out, which we did. I had stepped on something that was hot, and it felt like a round had gone off underneath my foot, and I wasn't sure what it was. Somebody was shooting at us, and the rounds were skipping off just in front of me and going right by my leg, going right by my knees. We started firing back, and all of a sudden we heard it was just one big loud bang, and the round stopped coming in. Somebody had taken out the snipers that were shooting at us. And so I know that we were being watched over by Americans. We were being watched over by Canadians on, what they call Overwatch or overhead. And a CC-130 gunship was called in to protect us. And that's how it was every time you went out the wire. If you went outside the wire and you weren't thinking that I might not come home this trip, then you were unsafe, because now you're getting too comfortable with going outside the wire. And each time we went out, we would think of that. So going 120 miles an hour every day, every minute, and then getting back to Canada and doing a full halt stop. Now I'm only doing 10 miles an hour. I'll tell you, that just, it plays in your head. It plays in your mind. You've shot at people. You've killed people. You've saved people. You've cut legs off. You've cut arms off, during surgeries to save people. And now you're doing nothing. And you just sit there and twirl your thumbs. You don't know what to do with your time. I tried everything. I tried, watching movies all the time. But everything I watched on TV, there was killings, there was blood, there was splatter. Couldn't watch it. Or they would have burnt bodies, and so I couldn't watch it. So I took up archery. No, couldn't do that. I took up flying drones and building drones. I did that for about 4 years, and then I couldn't handle small articles. I was shaking so bad. And now I occupy my time by picking a project, and I work at a project, small projects, little things, and small goals, and I work my way to those small goals. If I don't meet them, I'm not getting frustrated anymore, which is a good thing, because before I get frustrated, or if I didn't do it perfect, I would get frustrated and I would rip it all out and start from scratch. And that could mean, if I started a bathroom, I'd rip it all out and start from scratch. Most of my house has been built, starts at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I build till 6 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because if I don't sleep, I don't have nightmares. But to the point where if I wasn't sleeping, I'd fall asleep in the day and then have daymares, where I would start to doze off and then my head would take me right back. I can tell you the date, the time, the amount of bullets that went by my foot, that went by my head, that took out my ambulance, that every little detail, I have it upstairs in my brain. It's like a slide projector. Somebody just going, or a PowerPoint presentation, somebody just going click, 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 next slide, next slide, next slide. And it's just like 1,000 pictures go through my head in, it seems to me forever, but it might be only 20 minutes that I've fallen asleep.
When did you finally, what was the moment when you finally decided to call it quits? Was there something that you hit that wall and went in, or was it just accumulative and you said no, enough's enough? And when was that?
So I was posted in Petawawa. This would have been one of my last postings, but I was posted in Petawawa, and I hit that wall. One day I was walking across the parking lot, and my whole goal in the military was I always wanted to carry a pay stick. I didn't care about anything else in the military. My goal was I wanted to carry that pay stick. I wanted to be just like that regimental sergeant major that carried the pay stick on the parade. And I got to that goal at a point where I was still young enough in my career that I could have done probably another 5 years and enjoyed my last 5 years. The point where I hit the wall was when I come back from Afghanistan. It would have been in August, September 2009, that somebody yelled across the parking lot at me. And I wasn't sure who it was. My head was down. I was thinking, and I believe I was coming back from a medical appointment. And it was the head psychologist for the military, Colonel Bodum. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, "Doug," and I wasn't catching on. I wasn't quite listening to what he said, but he said, "Doug, you need to go get looked at." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're not you. You're not yourself." He said, "I knew you from being in Afghanistan." He says, "I know you from your career." He said, "I've worked with you your whole career." He said, "You're always a happy-go-lucky person." He said, "What I've seen in the last 2 days, I don't see that anymore." And so he started asking me some questions, and I said yes to a few of them, and I said no to a few more. And he wouldn't even let me go back into work. He took me, and we went over to the clinic, the mental health clinic, and I sat down in front of a team of about 6 people. And they were asking me questions, just to see where my mental status was. So, and I didn't think I was doing too bad. I thought I was doing really good. So anyways, probably 2 hours went by, and I really didn't even know 2 hours had gone by. It felt like about 10 minutes. And they said to me, I said, "Listen, I gotta get going." I said, I gotta get home. And they said, "Well, it's 5 o'clock. I guess we can finish up here." And I said, 5 o'clock? And they said, "Yeah." And so I finished up that day and I went home. And quite a few of those questions that they had asked me really bothered me. And it was like I lost control of my career at that point. And when I lost control was when I was no longer able to look after myself. And I could still look after my soldiers, but I forgot about myself. And I forgot that Doug's number one. Without Doug being the primary person that I look after, I can't look after my soldiers. So I realized then that my time was close. I hadn't really said 100% that I was going to retire, but it was in the back of my brain. It started. And that's when I lost everything. I lost sense of time. I lost sense of value. I lost self-worth. Just everything about myself. That's when I became a shell. And I think this colonel saw that I was just a walking shell. He saw that I was just basically no longer Doug. And so they moved me to Ottawa where I could get better care, first of all. And when I arrived in Ottawa, I butt heads with a full colonel. And I had probably 3 people working for me, beautiful people. 3 of them, 2 of them were women and 1 was a gentleman, and all civilians, but great people, being harassed by senior people in the military. And I said, no, I'm not going to let this happen. Not while I'm here and not while they're working for me. So I decided that my career was going to take, at that time, was going to take a kicking for what I was, if I stood up to do the right thing, but if I didn't and if I left, then I wouldn't have left with a good head on my shoulders. So I did. I started the ball rolling, put in the harassment complaints, did the paperwork, did everything. Well, as soon as that happened, my career stopped, and I knew it wasn't going to go any further. And that's when my wall came. And I said, I had enough, because now the good times are being outweighed by the bad. So good times are like this. The bad times are way down here, but that scale was coming up very quick. And that was due to a lot of politics, a lot of behind closed door deals and I didn't like that. I didn't like not being able to look after my troops. And so I said, this is going to be the last thing I did. And it was. I was able to get these people looked after. They got them into a job that they no longer were in harassment, and the complaints then were moved on. Like they were looked after. They weren't shoved under the rug, as we might say.
Maybe in wrapping it up, Doug, and just maybe a quick comment on, how are you now?
For right now, I'm doing much better, obviously. I'm in with a great group of people that support me 100% at my Legion. They have helped me work through a lot of my problems. I've been working at it now since 2009. I still see healthcare workers. I still see therapists. But again, I have good days and I have bad days. And when the bad days hit, they're very bad. And when the good days hit, I do very well. And but a lot's got to do with the fact that my friends are supporting me. They understand. They're starting to understand a little bit about it. My dad, when I first come home, didn't understand what PTSD was. Didn't understand that just certain phone calls could trigger me. Certain smells. If I smell diesel fuel, to this day, I get sick to my stomach, and it takes me right back into the lab. It triggers. I have so many triggers that I know what my triggers are. I avoid them. I avoid them with the plague. And if people look at me weird, well, I guess they're going to look at me weird. They're going to say, well, maybe I am broken inside. But now I can say I'm broken inside. At one time, I didn't know. At one time, I couldn't tell you. But through family, through my friends, I was able to look in the mirror and say that this is still a good person. I killed a Taliban. I see his face every day. And I was put on this world to save lives, not to take them. This, and it still bothers me. I don't know why people can shoot people and just slough it off, because I can't. I can't. It's just too hard. Sorry.
It's okay, Doug. Anything you can take a break there, Doug, and if any thoughts, and maybe as we kind of conclude the interview, is there anything that you'd like a message that you'd like to something personal, maybe something that anything that because I know we're rolling around to Remembrance Day, and we got a lot of younger people in the military now, younger than us, and there's the world is it's a dangerous place now, and it seems to be falling apart.
Mm.
And is there any thoughts that you in conclusion that you'd like to?
Well, I think one important thing is that we know that our soldiers, whether it be past, present, or future soldiers, are doing one thing, and that's keeping Canadians safe. That's a given. And I think as long as we're able to step out our house into our yard, play with our dogs or our kids, or go for a walk and not have to worry about stepping on a landmine, not have to worry about a drone coming in and doing a drone attack overhead, or doing a Scud missile attack or a cruise missile attack or some type of nuclear fallout. I mean, I think we're doing our job and we're protecting people. And I think that people are starting to forget what the military is all about, what the military has done over the years. It's kept us free. It's kept us able to speak out. It's kept us able to do those things, able to go downtown shopping. You go to some of these other countries and they don't have shopping malls. Why? Because they were just blown out. Look at Ukraine, prime example. 1 minute they're at peace. Next minute they're at war with the Russians. And we're so close to being on the brink of a war, a world war, that people need to realize, and we need to support our troops, whether that be past, present, or future. We always need to support our troops. If you can't stand behind us here in Canada, you're more than welcome to stand in front of us somewhere else in the world, is what I was always told. So please stand behind your soldiers, stand behind your troops, stand behind your family members. When they come back and they need support, help them. Don't leave them high and dry, and don't forget about them. They need your help. I couldn't do this alone. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have my family as good as they are. So there's many times that I could have just walked away. And I'm not like that.
All right. Well, thank you, Doug. I very much appreciate it.
No problem.